Hello again, everyone. I'm Fran, Chadha-Day, and today I'm here speaking with Asli Abdullahi. We're both physicists at the University of Durham, and we're going to talk a bit about Asli's research so far and her career in physics. My first question to you to get the ball rolling is, what is the one big question that your research is trying to answer?
Yeah, that's a big question. I would say, so to introduce, I work in neutrino physics. And I think it's an exciting area to work in just because neutrinos are basically the most abundant particle in our universe. And yet there are still so many unknown things about them. So properties that we know very well about other particles, for instance, their absolute mass or the type of particle they are, Majorana or Dirac, and this sort of thing is still not particularly confirmed for neutrinos. I think that's quite interesting. On top of the fact that the properties that we do know very well have pretty much stayed the same since they were first hypothesized by Pauli in 1930. We know they're low mass, we know they're electrically neutral, and we know they're weakly interacting, and not very much more has progressed since then. In combination with the fact there are so many still experimental anomalies from the 80s and 90s, with the old experiments, PS101, E816, to present day in Mini-Boon. I think it's interesting that there are still so many experimental anomalies. Of course, they could be due to other reasons, but it's exciting to wonder whether or not they are due to new physics in the neutrino sector. And so I think that's a good motivation to study neutrinos. But if I had to summarize a particular research goal of mine, it would be to answer any of these questions I've posed would require new physics. And so what I want to understand is exactly whether or not neutrinos do have hidden interactions, and we suspect that they do, and exactly what kind of interaction this would be. What is the nature of this sort of interaction?
So why is it that neutrinos, the lightest particles in the standard model, are a particularly interesting window for this new physics?
I would say it's because, sort of as I mentioned before, it's because they're abundant, so they're available. It's just that any explanation of these additional properties, for instance, in the standard model, we know the neutrinos don't have a mass. There's no mass term for them. And so writing down a term that generates their mass requires an additional particle. So already it's, I'd say, a frontier to new physics. Just in explaining this mass generation mechanism, you have to provide a new scenario for new physics. So I think that's interesting in itself, right? I'd say it's the easiest window to look for new physics.
Yeah. Brilliant. And do you remember why you first wanted to become a physicist?
Yes, I do. I'll say that I didn't want to become a physicist for a very long time. I wanted to do a lot of things in no particular order. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to be a jazz singer. That was an interesting time. I wanted to be a doctor. But it was my secondary school physics teacher who encouraged me to study physics. I think it was an EM lesson. I'd asked him something like a question related to the electric field and light. And he said something like, I can't answer this with the current syllabus or next year or the year after that. I think if you really want to answer these kind of questions, you're going to have to go study physics, and probably to an advanced degree. And at that moment, I'd never really considered being a physicist. Honestly, I'd never met any physicists. They were just, people contained in the pages of these biographies of famous scientists I'd read. They weren't, I couldn't really relate to it. But he planted the seed, and I remember I couldn't really stop thinking about it for a number of years. And it was in my final year of school that I thought, okay, I'm going to go and study physics. I don't know if that answers the question. Did you ask when or why? So I want to
kind of both. And yes, it does. Do you remember what your question about the electric field was?
I can't recall. It was something like, I remember at the time I was probably reading one of these popular science books about the photon nature of light. And I don't know, I can't remember. It was something like, there was a discrepancy in the description of the electric field and what I'd seen in these books. And I couldn't really understand it. And I'd asked him something about this. And of course, you don't study this in school. Why do I want to become a physicist? I think it's the only job, well, I don't know for sure, but it was the only subject that really allowed me to properly answer the questions that I had. So in every other subject, it felt almost as though the questions and their answers could always be improved, and it was always hinting towards a deeper question that was like not answered. And physics was the only subject I really felt was properly able to break things down and explain them in a way that I felt satisfied with the answer. And so if you're the kind of person who enjoys problem solving, I think it's a great subject for that. Yeah,
that's a really nice way of putting it. You know, it's the most fundamental thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't really know for a long time, because even at university, I started with natural sciences. So I was interested in chemistry. And I transferred to physics and then to theoretical physics within a term, because in my physical chemistry courses, it just didn't really feel like we were really getting at the answers, you know, in the way that we were in my physics classes. So I thought, okay, this is really what I probably should be studying.
Yeah. And from everything you've learned over your physics career, do you have a favorite physics fact?
Favorite physics fact? The only one I can think of in the theme of neutrino physics, the one I constantly tell my family and friends, is that there are, I think the number is 100 trillion neutrinos that pass through our body every second. I think that's a really great one, because it's like, there are so many, they're so abundant, and there's still so much to learn about them. So I guess that's the fact. 100 trillion.
That is a lot. And where do most of these neutrinos come from?
Well, primarily the sun. So solar neutrinos are a big source of the neutrinos, but also there are a ton of neutrinos just in our traveling through our universe. So the cosmic neutrino background, diffuse supernova neutrino background. So lots of different extragalactic sources, but primarily in our solar system, the sun.
Right. And can you explain why we don't feel these neutrinos that are streaming through us?
Right, so at that point I was mentioning earlier, it's that they're so incredibly weakly interacting. So neutrino interactions with matter increase with energy. And so if the neutrinos are not particularly, well, if they're not extremely energetic, their probability of interacting is incredibly low. And so that's why they're able to pass through the entire Earth and not do anything, basically. They're very, very, very weakly interacting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Which makes it so hard to study them, yeah.
Most of the time I forget about the neutrinos streaming through me, but it's pretty cool when you think of it.
I often do too. I spend so much time by just sitting here doing maths and thinking about their masses, not thinking about the hundreds of millions and billions that are traveling through us right now. It makes it a great time to be a neutrino physicist.
Yeah, it's hard enough to do the maths for one.
I know. Yeah. It takes creativity, I think, to properly study the neutrino.
Definitely. So that brings us nicely to the next question. Can you describe a typical day in your job?
Okay. Pre-COVID era, I would say, I mean, the job of a theoretical physicist is pretty much sitting at your desk with a pen and paper or a computer. So getting into the office, sharing a coffee with my office mate, and then getting started on the computer with my pen and paper. That's pretty much my day. I would say before I started my PhD, I figured I would be obsessed with a single problem and it would just be hours of working out one particular thing. But a lot of the time, I think the everyday life is balancing a lot of different projects. So that's something I've had to grow accustomed to.
And can you tell us about some of your hobbies or interests outside of physics?
I'm a keen language learner. I love languages. I don't really get that much time for it these days, not as much as I did when I was an undergrad. I was learning Korean at the time.
Oh, wow.
And now I've studied a bit of Italian recently, and at the moment I'm studying Spanish. I love to cook, so when I'm not working, I'm often cooking. I've gotten really into fresh pasta since I bought a new pasta maker. It's all this time, I guess, is forcing me to get more creative in the kitchen and try new recipes.
Yeah,
which I'm enjoying.
Yeah, it comes back to creativity again. I think one of the points I like to make is that I think maths and physics are very, very creative subjects. Kind of just as creative as things like, cooking, painting, music that we might do in other parts of our life.
I completely agree, especially because I work in model building, and sometimes trying to come up with new scenarios and things that work really require you to, I think in different ways.